Welcome to the Self-Control Show, a podcast for men. If you get defensive, shut down, or find yourself going 0 to 100, you're in the right place. Most men were never taught how to regulate their emotions. And this show is about changing that. It's not therapy, and it's not fluff. It's training. I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. Let's get to work. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I've got another great one for you this week, and I'm going to talk about something that, if I'm being honest, this was me like 5-10 years ago. And I'm seeing it just like so common for guys nowadays and probably since the beginning of forever. And that's the lone wolf syndrome, right? And why you do it alone. And, for the longest time, I prided myself in self-reliance, right? Not complaining, not asking for help, just, telling myself, I got this, I can handle this, right? But truly, if I was being honest, in that journey, I felt really alone, sometimes even in my own house, right? And what I didn't realize was the hidden price I was paying for doing it alone, right? And the disconnection that was causing, right? And how this can sound like either in your head or out loud is like, hey, I got this, or, I'll just deal with it. No one's coming to fix this, right? No one's coming to save you is one of the lines that I hear on social media a lot. And, sometimes we can convince ourselves that it's just easier to do it myself, right? And what that practically looks like is like not sharing your stress, not sharing what's going on for you, not expressing your needs, what you really want, right? Saying yes when you mean to say no, going quiet and shutting down when you get overwhelmed, right? Handling everything alone, all the while getting irritated when nobody understands you, even though you haven't shared what's actually going on for you. And you don't probably know what's going on for you, maybe even, right? And how this starts to happen is a lot of times we have experiences where, we find out through trial and error that we can't rely on someone in particular, right? Sharing your feelings, this happens for a lot of guys, myself included, just isn't a safe thing to do, right? Can't be sad, can't be vulnerable, can't be scared, can't feel shame, because it's usually met with mockery, right? Or somebody telling you like, hey, suck it up, right? Yeah, everybody's got problems, right? At least it's not this. Kind of like you look at somebody else's life. Sometimes you do this for yourself. Sometimes it's other people that do it for you, but they point out somebody else that has it worse. And then you kind of just like shove it all back down. So there's this like connection of needing people means you're weak, right? And, if you don't depend on anybody and you don't ask for help, well, then you can never be disappointed, right? But the problem is when that and how that shows up at home is you basically present as, hey, you're physically there, but emotionally you're not available, right? Because when you do it all by yourself, your wife can a lot of times see that as like you shutting her out, not being able to relate to her, not being able to share things back and forth, right? And that what that actually creates is her carrying more emotional weight, right? And for your kids, when you're kind of like doing everything on your own, they can just perceive that as like kind of you're always busy, right? You've always got something that you got to do. You're always tense. It's hard to approach you, right? They have to like think extra about like, hey, is dad in an okay mood for me to like come approach him, right? And a lot of times like might feel like you're like on this island and nobody really gets it. And what's actually happening is you're hiding, right? Because you can't connect with somebody that you never let in, right? If you don't ever let anybody in, how are you supposed to connect with anybody? If that makes sense, right? So what that's really costing you is because when you get isolated, basically, and you don't realize it, what happens is you start to resent people around you, right? And when you resent people, you distance yourself from them, whether you know it or not, right? And it's kind of a sad double-edged sword because we're co-creating this existence thinking that we are somehow helping because we're taking it all on. But because nobody knows that we're suffering kind of by ourselves, there's, in some ways, maybe a part of us that expects people to kind of just like realize what we're going through without actually telling them, which leads to resentment, which leads to distance, right? Because, you know, little things start turning into big things. There start to be tension around the house. You maybe start to feel disrespected and not appreciated. And what happens is instead of realizing that this is a pattern that's going on, we double down on the things that we're good at in order to hopefully get our needs met that we're not really actually expressing. So we spend more time at work instead of connecting with our wife and our kids. And that distance grows and the wedge grows, and the pattern actually gets worse. And eventually, what happens dynamically at home is like you turn into a roommate, you and your wife turn into roommates, right? And again, like when you're in that, what you're thinking is nobody appreciates me. I do all this stuff, right? And I'm all alone, right? I can't rely on anybody. And all my wife wants to do is pick out the things and criticize me. Because when we hear this feedback, it might be like, hey, I miss you, or you're distant, and all this stuff. That comes off as this attack, right? And instead of hearing it as like a cry for closeness, right, a connection, we see it as an attack. It doubles us down on that whole cycle of not feeling appreciated. And we, again, usually take that energy back to the workplace, right? That that activation in the moment for the lone wolf, right? When you think about it, it usually comes on when, number one, we feel criticized, right? Could be a little thing like, hey, you forgot to take the trash out, right? Or you said that you were going to do this and then you didn't do this, right? And that leads to overwhelm, which can lead to feeling rejected, right? Not good enough, like you're failing. And instead of being able to just like notice that and say like, oh man, I'm feeling like I'm not enough right now, right? Or that, hey, I'm triggered and like I'm really activated right now, and understanding like why that's happening for you. Again, we go double down into fine, like I can handle this, right? And there's this like, again, this quiet frustration, this resentment that builds, right? And the shift that needs to happen comes from understanding what's going on in your system, what's going on with your emotions, being able to regulate those things, right? Because this isn't about like dumping and oversharing, right? All the things that are going on for you and all your feelings as you feel them, but it's about being more in tune of what's actually going on and the cycle and the pattern that's there, that's playing out, right? To be able to like not be alone in those feelings of, man, today really kicked my ass, right? I'm more stressed than I realized, right? Which obviously leads to little things turning into big things. And when you can start to recognize like your stress and start to recognize and like, man, I'm feeling a certain sort of way right here, you can start building in things, giving yourself things that you need, right? And a lot of times, initially, guys just don't have the words to kind of like describe that, right? So these things happen unconsciously, and we just kind of like check out, or we kind of tense up, or we get defensive, or our walls go up and we don't realize it. But what we need to do is start to understand like what's happening in those moments so that you can pause and start coming back, right? And then you can start to have experiences of like, hey, I'm understanding what's going on for me, and I am going to not be alone in this, right? If you're carrying this big, heavy weight, of course you're going to be exhausted. Of course you're going to be tired. Of course, nobody's going to understand what's going on for you, because in a lot of ways, it's like you don't even really know what's going on for you, right? You're just sucking it up and pushing through. And when you do all that all by yourself for long enough, you're just going to burn out, right? You're going to be in this chronic fatigue. You're going to have probably a lot of good stuff going on in your life with your job, where you live, your resources that you have available to you, maybe even like your friend groups, etc. And you're just going to kind of feel shitty still. That's how you know that there's a regulation issue at play, right? It's like you don't know what you don't know. And if you're not feeling good, it's kind of like Hey, if your check engine light's going off, right? First of all, you don't even realize that you have a check engine light. You're not going to realize that you need something to be fixed or to like worked on to your car until basically you see the steam coming up from underneath the hood, right? So what needs to happen is you got to address the thing that's going on under the hood, and then in the future you have to start paying attention to that check engine light that pops up, right? And the better that you are at doing that and like asking for help in that and getting support in that, the quicker you are going to be going back into your life in a new way, right? Because the people that go the furthest in life aren't the ones that do it by themselves. There's nobody successful that's gotten that way all by themselves, right? None. Super successful people, at least. You can have some success by yourself, but everything has a ceiling. And the way that I see it, and the analogy that I like to use a lot, is just like think about F1 cars, right? Fastest people, fastest drivers in the world. They don't do it alone. They have a team, right? And they don't just like go full speed ahead 24/7, right? For the whole race. They take strategic stops and they pay close attention to their machine, right? And we men typically just do the opposite. It's like sleep when you're dead. Nobody cares how you feel, right? I see this all the time on Instagram. If you're having a hard day, just remember, nobody cares. And it's a sad truth for a lot of guys is like grow up having that kind of like mirrored back to us in a lot of ways that nobody cares, right? Nobody cares, work harder, right? And I resonated so hard with that for so long. And it gets you to a certain point, right? I'm not knocking that. In a lot of ways, it takes a lot of mind power to be able to push through uncomfortable shit, right? But it's not a great long term strategy, right? It would just be like ignoring your check engine light for forever on your car, right? Can you go far fast? And it's like, yeah, of course you can go far fast, right? But eventually it's going to catch up to you as it does for all of us. And that happens especially when you have kids, right? Especially when you get into long term relationships, because those things require us to slow down, right? To get support, to ask for help. If there's one thing that I wish and being a part of the change in for guys is that, asking for help and getting support was just a thing that was a thing, right? And you think about it, you think about the highest level, right, of sports, let's just say, it was just the Super Bowl. Guess what? Both teams had coaches, right? And they had specialist coaches, and they've got the most support that there is. But yet, for guys, let's just say the average guy, getting support is actually the opposite, right? If you get support, it's like, oh no, right? I'm the person that needs help. Oh man. Well, the best of the best of the best have the most help. Do you think that there's a coincidence there? Probably not, right? But again, this makes so much sense. And like I said, I lived it, right? I was so proud of like how little I needed to ask for help, right? But I was also suffering. I was like, exhausted. I was unhappy, right? And I wasn't getting the results that I wanted, especially with the people that were closest to me. And, if you guys take anything from this episode, it's that there are lots and lots of people that have been living in that sort of cycle with you. Ultimately, like, at least what it was for me, boiling down to it is like I was really afraid to like get it wrong. Right? I had lots of experiences of not doing it right and getting it wrong in front of people, and that just not being met with like, yeah, no big deal, right? You can get it wrong. Actually, the fastest way to be an expert is to get it wrong so much that you get it a little bit right the next time, right? A little bit more right, I should say. And that's probably the number one lesson that I learned when getting my black belt in jiu-jitsu, right? Because I was always trying to get it right. What did that lead to? Well, I stopped taking chances, right? I stopped really putting myself in bad positions for like years. I did that until I finally let go of and got in touch with what was there and why, like, I, what getting it wrong meant to me, what I did with that, and what I made it mean about me. And eventually, with enough disconfirming experiences of everything being okay when I got it wrong, it turned into a superpower, right? Because I started realizing like how many people were afraid of getting it wrong, how many people were afraid of failing, right? How many people were afraid of looking, a certain way in front of people. It's almost everybody, right? Not everybody, but a lot of people. And when you're able to kind of shift this narrative internally, what happens is it's like having a support team behind you. Then all of a sudden, it's like, you know, going back to a car analogy, let's just say you think you're a V6, but actually you're a V12, right? And maybe you've got turbos, if you will, but you don't have the support to access that because you don't know what you don't know, is really what it is. And so, what I'd encourage all guys to do is to find a group, find help, find support, right? In learning new skills that maybe we don't have, maybe we didn't learn in school, maybe were never given to us. But a lot of times, in order to do that, we have to overcome the thing that's kind of keeping us stuck. And in a lot of ways, is this that lone wolf syndrome. So, as you look at yourself in the mirror, ask yourself, like, what do I make it mean about me when I need help or if I need help? What are the thoughts, stories, and beliefs that I tell myself about people that get help, right? And just notice if you go to a negative critical, part of your system activates, right? Because that's a big, big signal that there might be some elements of this going on for you, right? And a lot of times that is the thing that is keeping you stuck, right? Reaching out, there's no stupid question, is kind of what that is practically, right? So yeah, if this is you, then I would say take a chance, right? Part of why I offer complimentary calls to talk with guys about what's going on for them is to give them an experience of, somebody that's a normal dude that's been in a lot of shit, that's come through the shit, gotten onto the other side mostly, to let them know like, hey, there's hope, right? Things can change, cycles can break. You can dig yourself out of a place where I remember sitting in my room just thinking I was in such a deep, dark hole. How could I possibly ever pull myself out? And I did. It's possible, but I didn't do it by myself. I did it in support. And that's available for you too. And I would say if any of this resonated, hop on a call, book a time, and would love to connect. So thanks for listening, guys. Catch you on the next one.